Well, thank you, friends. Yeah, super sad. Just naming it, super sad. Um, but feel blessed to be here, and yeah. And so the Mishnah for today is always relevant. So if you've been following the morning Musar, then today's Mishnah will sound very familiar. But I wanted to speak a little bit about it, offer some new thoughts, and really maybe just kind of be in conversation about it. So I clicked onto like 1,000 meetings here today. Okay, Rabbi Yaakov Omer. So Rabbi Yaakov, we actually have in the Gemara in Kedushin around Chav Test 29 in the discussion about whether or not there's reward for mitzvos in this world. There are a few verses like honoring one's parents, shooing away the mother bird from the nest, where it says you do this, you get long life. And there's a whole discussion. The Gemara, does that mean long life in this world? Does that mean long life in the next world? The Gemara gives this very sad story about a parent who told the child to go and, shoo away the mother. The kid falls. Like there's a whole deep conversation about what any of this means. But anyways, this Rabbi Yaakov is the same as that, and the positions are consistent. So even though we don't have it, I don't know that we have other teachings from Rabbi Yaakov here. Seeing it in the context of what he says in the Gemara over there is a little bit helpful. Okay. Ha'olam hazeh, this world, daimel leprusdor, it is comparable to, it's analogous to some sort of a vestibule, an entrance corridor, bifnei ha'olam haba, before the world to come. Hasakein atzmecha beprusdor. A person is supposed to, in a different context, I would say like, prepare oneself, but really it means to fix oneself. Okay, we'll translate this and then we'll get into it. The root there is tikun, means to fix. Here they should to prepare oneself. But prosdor, kedei shetikanes latzrak lin, which of course is Greek, for the banquet hall. So the Rashi here says that, and there's something about this that I think is other commentaries point out is actually really, it's meant to be encouraging, that when you go to, let's say, a wedding, when people could get together, okay, so there's a room, you drop off your coat, and then before you get to, let's say, the main room where everybody is, there's often kind of an opening, some sort of corridor, there's a mirror there. If you're wearing a tie, you make sure your tie is straight. If you're wearing a hat, you make sure your hat is straight. You look to make sure you don't have the makeup's, like it's the final touches to make sure things are aligned. And you look good before you walk in. But a snapshot is like you go there in your pajamas and like you have to put on your outfit, right? It's not like you need a wardrobe change. It means like you have to like be masakin, straighten oneself out. It's the wrong word to use, but to make sure that things are good. And so too, like, and that's what Rashi says, that like when we think about who we are when we're born and who we are, 120 years later, how different are we? In terms of the natural pieces that like we've put in the effort to change about ourselves. Hopefully it's the finishing touches, right? It's not like we're growing limbs or, becoming new creatures. We're becoming the best version of ourselves. And when we're born with some slight modifications and adjustments which are necessary. We have to work on being more humble. We have to work on being more generous. We have things we have to work on. We have to make sure that we have everything in the right proportions. But it's not like, we show up, and like we're a mermaid, and then like we have to like figure out how to get, a different body. It's slight adjustments. And if we think about, the work that we have to do, the way in which we would present as being the best version of ourselves, as opposed to like what happens if we put in no effort. I mean, hopefully those are two different people. Practically speaking, us on a good day, us on a bad day, how much space really exists. So the idea is that if we don't see that space exists, then let's say from 1 year to year, like from Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur, from your birthday to another birthday, how different are we from 1 year to the next? And I think sometimes it's a little bit, it can be a little bit depressing. Like last year I was working on this year I'm still working on it, right? and you can pick whatever the thing is. I have a gym membership. Did I use a gym membership? Did I read all the books I wanted to read? Like whatever the goals were for the year that were like aspiration. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. It's really the wrong way to look at it. It's super the wrong way to look at it. Because if you think about, how much time there is in a year, and if you've seen Rent, exactly, right, how to describe that. The choices that we make, if we're sensitive to them, the choices are nonstop. And in the ability to show up and to make a choice in the moment of putting an effort is worth a universe of lifetimes. And that's really the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah says that, even just one, we'll just see it quickly because it's the same author. And I think it'll help. Right. And he continues to say, right, it's more precious 1 hour in this world, right, than the entire life of the world to come. So next week we'll talk about that more. But if we think about how precious one moment is, right, that is 1 moment of 1 hour, 1 moment really in this world of doing the right thing is worth all of the next world. So then we can't even think about it from year to year or from decade to decade. That's not the metric. So there are a few different interpretations of this, and I know I mentioned at the beginning we wanted to have time for a conversation about it. Rashi also quotes here this parable of what you don't put into the oven. A person that is not tireach puts in effort Erev Shabbos, then you don't have what to eat on Shabbos. And the commentators, generally in the world of Musar, are bothered. Why is it necessary to put in this word of tireach, of effort? A person who doesn't toil Erev Shabbos won't have what to eat. Some Shabbosim, I don't toil at all, and Wendy cooks beautiful food, and I have all sorts of yummy things to eat. So why do I have to be busy with it? Generally, I'm the one cooking because I'm a little bit better with time, and especially the winter with Erev Shabbos when the relates to time differently than I do. So, but the question's a really valid question. So one interpretation, we shared this a few weeks ago when we were studying the Ramchal in the morning, is that this world, if we think about the tension between the body and the soul in this world needs the practice, the exercise to habituate itself, to become accustomed to be able to put in the effort, to be able to appreciate the spiritual world. And it's that work of allowing it to manifest itself, to give it kind of exercise that it prepares it for the next world to be able to be in good shape. Again, one of the big principles of Musar, and certainly the mystical world, is everything that we see in the physical world is simply kind of a reflection of the mystical, of the spiritual. I said it a couple of days ago about being homesick. It's a powerful idea, just the sense that a person has of missing home, right? That actually comes in its spiritual component, a parallel from the soul missing, being back up in heaven. And so whenever we experience an emotion, whenever we feel something, it's worth kind of sitting with and trying to reflect, where is that parallel in the soul level, on the soul level. So when we think about like exercising or trying to, work out the different parts of our body so that they're nice and, prepared for doing what they were created to do, it's worth thinking about that need of the soul to also be exercised and to be used, because it is a function of effort. And I think that's one of the great unifiers or great equalizers in Jewish theology around punishment and reward, is that it's always about the effort. If something comes easy to a person, it's not impressive to God. It's very impressive to us, right? A person can paint a masterpiece, right, without a lot of effort. Super impressive to us. But from God's perspective, God gave, everybody gifts and talents. And so we're supposed to use them to make the world better. But if something is difficult to us, and we've spoken about this many times, that in the physical world, a person should compete where they're strong, because you want to be competitive and make a difference in ways that reflect what you're able to offer most efficiently. But when it comes to the spiritual world, it's the things which are difficult that God really values. It comes easy and it's not impressive to God. Okay, so let's pause. I'm happy to put the Mishnah back up on the screen. But if people have questions about this, either very broadly about when we think about the world to come, I guess just another disclaimer. We have to wait for the world to come to really know what it looks like. Maimonides has one kind of approach to it. Others take a different approach to it. The world to come within basic kind of the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto's world, the world to come is not the world after we die. The Ramchal writes in Derech Hashem, the Way of God, that when a person dies, there's what's known as the Eilam and Neshamas. There's a soul world where a person, depending on what they did in this world, is able to enjoy great kind of delight in proximity to God. But it's also kind of a holding place for souls until this world finishes its cycle, whatever that looks like. And then bodies and souls are reunited after some sort of time. And then there'll be another existence here in the world to come, some sort of spiritual world, which may or may not have bodies. It's a big dispute. We have to wait and see. Okay, yeah, Ben. And then, and then Nori.
So what's occurring to me is we're talking about preparing yourself in the vestibule for the world to come, but we actually came from that world. So it ties in very well with what we learned earlier, which is anything you learn here, you should already know. Anything I try to teach you here, you should already know this. And that's because we came from the spiritual world. We're returning to the spiritual world. The question is, what have we forgotten? What do we need to practice to be prepared again?
Yeah.
But even the prep should be familiar to us.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I know I've said this over, but it's a deep, 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 deep truth that is universal, right? We're going to learn about it on Hanukkah, that there's this, the Sfarim have different languages to it, but basically what it's experienced at the beginning prepares for the end, to such an extent that God says, that what God envisioned in action, the end started with, but even that divine light of that very beginning is then hidden. It's analogous, the rabbis tell us, to and I know we've said this over, to an adult that's teaching a child how to walk. And so like you hold the hands, they take a couple of steps, you let go, and they fall. But they've experienced what that's like, meaning they've gone through the motions, assisted to experience it, so that now when they're on their own, they have some sort of model. That's why the rabbis tell us, Gemara Nida, maybe like Daf Lamed-ish, around page 30, that in utero there's angels that are teaching, because it needs to be familiar that we should be able to relearn it. Rav Gusman is a famous question that's asked, if every person who is pregnant is carrying around the child that has an angel that is learning the entire Torah, why aren't we standing up for all the pregnant people? Because they've got the world's biggest Torah scholars in them. So the different answers that are given, one is a nice answer that, like, Torah that can't be shared is not holy, which is a beautiful answer. But the other is that the Torah that we appreciate is the Torah that came through struggle, that came through toil, and this child that's being taught is not struggling. It's very easy in that space. In part, it's very easy in that space because the soul recognizes God, right? The soul is a portion of God. Torah is just a way of understanding God. God is God's self, and for us, in terms of what's the expectation from God in relationship to God in this world, that's the Torah simply is a language of Torah, of instruction, right? We, like, a person knows how to put together a bookshelf. You don't need the instructions if you're familiar with it, right? A person is familiar with God, then you don't need the instructions because, right? And that's one of the interpretations of why Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the Gemara says, they kept the Torah even though the Torah wasn't given, because if you have that level of closeness to God, so then, like, you don't need the instructions. It's like obvious. This is a really deep point in terms of the sensitivity. In relationships, if you're able to intuit, then you don't need to be told. And if you're not sensitive and you don't listen, and you were told, so then often you get told again and it's louder. And then if you don't listen that time, right, it only heads in one direction. It's not good. So if we think about being in a healthy relationship, right, through the experimentation and exploration and the development, then we're able to actually get to a place where we're able to intuit and then preemptively be healthy in that relationship. Yeah, Lori, please.
Right. So this is about a question of getting from here to there. So you're in despair, you're sad, you're all these terrible things, and you know that you have to do something good for the world, and that's your way out of despair. But there's like a little moment in between of being in despair, noticing you're in despair, and then remembering to do the good thing. And I'm not always able to bridge that gap. Like, a lot of times I'll just stay in despair because it just feels more comfortable, or I won't notice that I'm in despair, but I am, or I won't remember to do a good thing. So it's that little space gap, but it feels huge sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, it can, there's something deep also, like sometimes when we're so sad, we just want to lie on the floor and kind of not move. And on some level, it's like us, our physical body going back to its source. Like it just wants to be held and go home. Like it's actually like it's too hard to get up and to walk. Um, and each person is different in terms of what, when we think about competing where we're strong, each one of us has things that we do really well. And when it comes to trying to be productive in the world, it's worth deploying the things that we're really good at to help support and kind of nurture the things that we don't do so well. So like for me, there's often like a cerebral piece that just, kicks in that says, you know what, you know, I know that like the body doesn't want to move, and I know that I don't have no desire or motivation to do this thing, but the brain says to me like, yeah, but you know what, you're going to be happier on the other side of this. Like, if you do this thing, that's actually what will be the most nourishing and the most comforting. And then it's why it's so important to practice being able to listen to that good voice when we do have the energy, because when we can, there's something about, and I'm sure we've all experienced this in different places. There's a place a person can get to where they're able to kind of stretch the limits and kind of like instruct their body to do something, even though the body is no longer interested in doing it. And there's a certain kind of zone of just trying to say like, okay, I'm going to visualize myself doing this, and I'm just going to like kind of will it into being. So the more that we're able to get into, and like part of it is maturity. Like kids don't want to do things that they don't want to do. Like, make your bed. Oh, I don't, right. So, and so as we get older, we can say, listen, nobody wants to make their bed. We all realize that like the day's a better day when the bed's made. It just, it for whatever, I don't know, like the deep mystical significance of making one's bed, but there's certain people like you see them in the stores. Like this person did not make their bed this morning and perhaps ever. I don't know why, but okay, not our sugya, but when we can get ourselves into that place of being able to say like, okay, I can name that this is what it feels like to be underneath a bus, and like actually like it's too heavy, I can't lift up the bus, it's too much to move. But I know that if I like sit up right now, then I can do that, and I can put my shoes on, and like then like just it's about, I think, narrowing the space, lowering the bar, and creating a little bit of momentum of saying like, okay, I don't actually need to be on the floor right now, I can stand up. And then, but it's hard. And I think being able to recognize it in the moment. And look, and sometimes like, I'm sure we've said this over, but one of my favorite lines in Alice in Wonderland is, don't just do something, stand there. And there's, we're called human beings, but it's often so hard to just be. I suffer from this. I often move quickly through things because sometimes it's just too painful to be stationary. Like it's actually just too painful to be present with it. And there's an escape from that by saying, okay, I'll do something. And there are unhealthy, extremes in everything. But when a person feels, I don't know how to say this well, but the most godly thing about us is being able to give. And so when we're able to do something for another, there's something deeply centering and reinvigorating, meaning it gives us life. A person who's in a position where they can't give, that life is a very difficult life. So there's certain things that like it's never bad to do. There's certain like you go to the doctor. This won't hurt you if you take it. Like nothing battle, right? There's certain things like it's better to cover the bases. I don't know. I feel like everything has side effects. I'm not a doctor, but telling somebody that you care about them, it never hurts the world, right? There's certain things that are just good for the universe, and yeah, I mean, it's hard to narrow the space. Yeah, Saul.
So, two things now. One is, for many people, it's hard to recognize what they do that is good. I know somebody who keeps lambasting themselves. I didn't do this, and I didn't do this, and the list is huge. And then I sit there and go, but you did this, and you spoke to this person, and you were helpful to them, and you did this and this. But, we say that about school teachers who have principals who constantly complain about what they're doing in the classroom and never, ever, ever say, but this part of the lesson was really, really good. You got the students really, they don't. It's like they're trained, the principals are trained not to do that. And you get browbeaten into saying that, I don't do it well. I don't teach well, and I don't live well because I don't. And the other thing you said about being constantly in motion is, I know for many of us during this time, that's what we do. That's what I do to keep my day going. I create a schedule, and it's like this. I rest, I nap and I rest, but it's truly, I study Torah, I clean the house, I do this, I make a phone call. Everything is according to the schedule so that I don't have time to stop and say, oh my God, I'm the age and they tell me I shouldn't go out at all.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to stay home all the time.
Yeah. These are great points. And indeed, the verse tells us, to love another, we're supposed to love another like we love ourselves, but if you don't love yourself, then it's problematic. On this point and related to the Mishnah, and to your point, Saul, and I think I said this over at some point this year, but in giving premarital counseling classes, which I used to do a lot as part of my job when I was the dean of students of a yeshiva, there's two types of advice, right? Let's say, the one partner is about to go out to a meeting, and so they ask the other, how do I look? So there's two ways to give criticism, right? You could say, your tie is crooked, and that's really helpful because you can adjust the tie and then it's not crooked. But if a person says, your nose is crooked, so it's not helpful. It's not helpful because what are you supposed to do, right? And so I've found that, and the Muslims firms speak about this, that the worst sickness is the sickness that a person doesn't even know that they have. Because if you don't know that you have it, then you can't treat it. So if a person says about themselves, hey, I'm so lazy, I'm so this, I'm so that, you say, okay, great. That's great that you know that you're lazy. All of us have that. So what are you going to do about it? Meaning, okay, so that's a tie is crooked situation. That's not a nose is crooked. Okay, so laziness is a character trait. So what are you going to do to stop being so lazy? You're motivated to criticize yourself, right? That exists. You have the ability within you to feel like you can point out and observe, every nuance of your imperfections. Okay, so good. So channel that into doing something about it and stop kvetching. Yeah, people are who they are, and I think part of what this Mishnah is telling us is that we come into this world pretty hardwired, right? We have environmental things, we have genetic things, but by the time a person is, I'm sure I've mentioned, there's just been all these funerals recently. Just today, I found out, in the middle of the night, the Mashkiach, the dean of students of my yeshiva in the Mir, the world's largest yeshiva, Rabbi Chodesh, passed away. He was 92. He contracted COVID months ago, and I keep getting updates, say Tehillim, he's been on a ventilator for months now, and he finally passed away. So in these, so I've been going to a lot of funerals, and so I see people I haven't seen in 20 years, and you see them, and they're essentially the same person. They're 20 years older, meaning their character traits, their mannerisms. You see this guy keeps chuckling. This guy, used to chuckle like this one, chuckle like this. They're the same. That part doesn't change. So when a person comes into this world, by the time they're whatever it is, 5 years old, 15 years old, 25 years old, as a person gets older, life happens. Hopefully they learn from it. But, I think what it's trying to tell us is that, if we don't put in the effort, we could really be the same person later in life than we are early in life. And then that's sad, because life is not about the observations. It's not about the experiences. It's about, as we're going through it, what have we done to both respond to the world to fix it, and also to be able to internalize the messages, to be able to do the work internally. So, Judaism is a religion of action. And so when we think about fixing the world, when we think about fixing ourselves, if we're the same before and after the fix, then nothing was fixed, right? Because in part because we don't acknowledge anything's broken. I mean, it's got to be depressing to hear me talk every single day about how broken this world is. But if we see it as an invitation, as an obligation, then we can acknowledge I'm not okay with this. And I think, at least for me, in being able to say I'm not okay with this, is a way of making sure that we don't become complacent and accept that which is actually unacceptable. I know that we spoke about this on the Mishnah, that we're supposed to judge everybody favorably. One of the interpretations is that when a person sees somebody doing something that ostensibly is wrong, we can get desensitized to it, and then it's not a big deal that everybody's doing this, and then that which is wrong becomes right because everybody's doing it. So by judging somebody favorably, there's a way in which we kind of preserve and maintain the standard of what's acceptable. And then we say to ourselves, it must be that there's a story that this person is doing this that I'm seeing, because it can't be they're doing that, because that's really wrong. right? So we're judging them favorably by, there's a way of, we maintain the standard of what's acceptable by trying to create some sort of narrative that we shouldn't become desensitized to what's really wrong and what's really right. And, you know, I think all of these texts can be learned in a really depressing way. You know, the text of, you know, maybe, you know, it's better that we shouldn't have been created. In a theoretical space, like, it's an interesting idea, but in the practical world, there's no discussion. We're here and we have to, you know, and God put us here, which means that there's a purpose, and God put us here, and God is good. So it means that it's good for us to be here. And, you know, the more that we're able to, I think, tap into that next world, right, to live with kind of one foot in there. All sorts of other stupid, frustrating things happen today. But in the scheme of it all, none of it's important. Like, none of it's important. And I think part of the lesson of seeing ourselves as temporarily in this world, permanently working for the next, is to be able to let go of the stuff that's stupid. Like, 120 years from now, am I going to worry about this? The stupid things I'm not going to worry about. If I worried about it, that means that, like, I gave them too much effort. So maybe one of the lessons for this is that, you know, it's a great way of trying to discern, like, what is it worth stressing out about? There are things that are worth stressing out about. And unfortunately, I think, you know, the world is preoccupied. Do you remember when Obama wore a tan suit and the world freaked out? Yeah, like, so that's something that, like, wasn't worthy of the time that and the space that it occupied. And there's a privilege, and there's a real privilege in stressing out about things which are completely, you know, useless to the universe. All right, enough negativity for today. Find the good and embrace it. And for the things that feel hard, you know, try to just maybe go through that process of, you know, what can I do right now that is absolutely, yeah, he did look great in it. The guy's got style. He's got a lot. Anyways, what's one thing when we feel really sad? What's one thing that we know is true, is eternal, is good, that we can say, like, let me just do this thing. And if I still feel sad on the other side of it, I'll go back to the floor. All right, friends, have a wonderful Shabbos, and I'll see you, God willing, next week. Take care.